Okay, so you've given us quite the challenge here.
Yeah.
A whole stack of material.
Mm-hmm.
But right at the heart of it
Right.
is this book by Jiddu Krishnamurti,
Yeah.
The First and Last Freedom,
It's a classic.
from 1954.
Mm-hmm.
And this copy in particular,
Yeah.
it's got this library stamp from the LBSNAA,
I see that.
the Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy of Administration.
Okay, so someone in the series has been doing some serious reading.
Exactly. So our mission, I guess, for this deep dive
Yeah.
is to kind of navigate this book, pull out the key insights, the things that are really going to resonate with you, and maybe even spark a few of those aha moments along the way.
Yeah, those light bulb moments.
Without, drowning in all the philosophy.
Right.
Right.
Dive in carefully.
Exactly. Okay, so The First and Last Freedom.
Well, I mean, it's a collection, right?
Yeah, it draws from all sorts of talks and dialogues that Krishnamurti gave.
And the table of contents alone.
Yeah.
Oh, it's daunting.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got everything from like the individual and society to self-knowledge.
Right.
There's stuff on fear and desire,
Mm-hmm.
even really big questions about, nationalism, spiritual teachers,
Oh, wow.
war, even the meaning of life.
That's a lot of ground to cover.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be quite a journey.
We better get started then.
Let's do it.
Okay, so right off the bat, we've got this foreword by Aldous Huxley,
Oh, yeah.
which is interesting in itself.
Yeah, he frames it in a really...
Well, he kind of sets the stage.
He does. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
For everything that Krishnamurti is going to talk about.
Yeah.
And he has this...
This image of humans as amphibians.
Amphibians. Okay.
Living, in this kind of dual world.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
One foot in the world of matter,
Mm-hmm.
the tangible world.
Right.
And then the other in this world of symbols,
Okay.
language, science,
belief systems.
all of that.
Okay, so he's saying these symbols, they're crucial.
They are.
They're necessary, but they also come with some real dangers.
Yeah, there's a dark side to them.
And here's where it gets really interesting. I think,
Lay it on me.
well, Huxley argues that even people
It'd be good.
with the best of intentions, right?
Mhm.
Idealists,
Right.
people who are trying to make the world a better place,
Mm-hmm.
they can end up causing a lot of harm
A lot of damage.
because they're working within these symbolic systems.
Yeah, they get so caught up in the symbols, they lose sight of the bigger picture.
And he even says that even the most learned people
Right.
can fall into this trap
Avoid.
of mistaking their verbal construction,
Words.
their ideas, their theories for reality itself.
So they start believing that the map is the territory.
Right. They forget that it's just a representation. It's
Yeah.
not the real thing.
Exactly. And that can be dangerous.
Just think about like political slogans, for example.
Oh, yeah.
Or ideologies.
Yeah, they can take on a life of their own.
They can be so powerful,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
But they can also distract us from what's actually happening,
From the real human experience.
from the lived reality.
Exactly.
So it's like Huxley's giving us this big warning sign.
I'm a heads up.
Right before we even dive into Krishnamurti.
Pay attention.
Right.
Be aware.
Be aware of the power
Yeah.
of these symbols.
And the illusions they can create.
And don't just accept the words at face value.
Dig deeper.
Right.
Question everything.
Really try to understand what they're pointing to.
Absolutely.
Okay, so as we go through this book,
Yeah.
I think it's going to be really important for us to keep that in mind.
To stay mindful.
Right? How often do
With
we
often?
do we treat our own beliefs as absolute truths?
Yeah.
When really they're just
models.
representations.
Frameworks.
Yeah, and they might not always reflect the full complexity
Of reality.
what's actually going on. So
Yeah.
we're not going to try to cover every single chapter.
Right.
We're not going to give you all the answers.
It's not a textbook.
No.
It's a deep dive.
Right. We want to get to the heart of it.
Yeah.
What are the core ideas?
Yeah. What are the big themes?
The recurring themes.
Yeah.
The things that really make you think differently.
The insights.
Yeah. And we want to keep it,
Digestible.
engaging.
Yeah.
Something you can actually take away and use.
Right.
So we're going to kind of guide you through
Yeah.
some Krishnamurti's central arguments.
We'll connect the dots.
Right.
And we'll try to understand why these ideas are still relevant.
Even today.
Yeah.
Okay, so where does Krishnamurti begin?
Well,
What's the foundation of his thinking?
one of the foundational principles in The First and Last Freedom,
Yeah.
and you see this especially in the early chapters, like, what are we seeking?
Mhm.
And self-knowledge
Right.
is this emphasis on understanding yourself
Okay.
as the starting point for any real change.
So before you try to change the world,
Before you change anything.
you have to understand yourself.
Yeah. He really challenges our tendency
Yeah.
to look outside of ourselves
For answers.
for happiness,
Yeah.
for security.
So he's skeptical of gurus' belief system.
Organizations.
Right, like all these external things that we
cling to.
That we think are going to save us.
Yeah. We're always searching outward for solutions to what are really inner problems.
He doesn't think that's the answer.
He really doesn't.
Okay.
He argues that this outward seeking is often a way of trying to avoid looking inward.
So we're running away from ourselves.
In a way.
Yeah.
We're trying to escape our own discomfort.
Our own unease.
Yeah.
But he says that real understanding, real freedom from these internal conflicts can only come from
going inward.
Yeah.
From exploring your own inner world.
Just exploring.
Your thoughts.
Yeah.
Your desires, your beliefs, all the things that shape how you see the world.
And he talks a lot about self-knowledge.
Yeah.
What does he mean by that?
Well, it's not just about knowing your likes and dislikes
or
your personal history.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the mechanisms of your own mind.
Okay.
How it works.
How it operates.
Yeah.
So it's not just knowing what you think, it's knowing how you think.
Exactly.
Okay.
And for Krishnamurti, this self-knowledge, it's not something you just acquire and then you're done.
Right.
It's an ongoing process.
Okay.
It's about observing your mind in action.
Okay.
How you react. How your past experiences are shaping your perceptions.
So how all that baggage is affecting how you see things.
Right.
Okay.
And he suggests that the problems we have in the world, the conflicts, the disagreements,
even the big societal problems,
all of it are actually reflections of our own inner conflicts.
So he's saying the world is you.
The world is you.
Wow. Okay. So if the problems out there are just projections of what's going on inside of us.
Fade away, yeah.
Then trying to fix the world without understanding ourselves first.
It's like you.
It's like trying to adjust the projector when the problem is with the camera lens.
That's a great analogy.
So you can fiddle with all the external stuff.
You can tweak the settings.
You can try to make things look better on the surface.
Yeah.
But if the source is messed up,
the image is still going to be blurry.
It's still going to be distorted.
Yeah.
Okay, so then he also talks about the limitations of thought.
Right.
And this is where it gets a little bit
counterintuitive.
Yeah. Because we're always told to use our minds.
Think things through.
Right. To be rational, to be logical.
Yeah.
But Krishnamurti seems to be saying that.
That thinking can actually be part of the problem.
Okay. So how does that work?
Well, he makes this distinction between thought, which is based on memory and past experiences, and direct experiences of the present moment.
So being in the now.
Exactly.
Okay.
And he argues that thought, because it's always referencing the past, can never fully grasp something new.
Okay.
It can't bring about real transformation.
Because it's stuck in the old pattern.
Right. Okay. And he says that actions driven by preconceived ideas or intellectual frameworks, they're often limited.
Okay.
And they can actually lead to more conflict.
Some more problems?
Yeah.
Because they're not coming from a place of
true understanding.
Right.
Of awareness.
Okay. So for him, authentic action, it comes from
a state of awareness.
Not from an idea. So it's not about thinking your way out of a problem.
It's about seeing.
Right.
Clearly being present.
Sure. Responding from that place.
Exactly.
Okay.
So if we're constantly interpreting everything through the lens of our past, through our conditioning, we're never really seeing things as they are.
Right. We're seeing them as we are. Okay, so this brings us to awareness, which he talks a lot about.
A lot.
So what is he talking about when he says awareness?
Well, he advocates for this state of passive observation.
Okay.
You know, just being fully present. Without judgment.
Without trying to analyze everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he says that this kind of awareness allows you to see the whole picture.
Okay.
Including your own reactions.
Yeah.
Your pre-programmed responses.
Right.
But you're not getting caught up in them.
So you're observing them.
You're witnessing them.
Yeah.
But you're not identifying with them.
Yeah. Okay, so it sounds like he's talking about...
It's like mindfulness.
Yeah.
But maybe even more expansive than just focusing on your breath or your senses.
It's about being aware of the whole psychological process.
Your whole inner world.
Yeah. And he's very clear about the difference between this
open awareness and introspection.
Okay.
So introspection is often driven by a goal. You're trying to figure something out. You're trying to improve yourself.
Okay.
And that can actually lead to more self-judgment.
More separation.
Yeah, more division within yourself.
Okay, but awareness.
Awareness is just about seeing what is without any agenda.
So you're not trying to change it.
You're just observing it.
You're just noticing it.
Exactly.
Okay, and he also talks a lot about fear and desire.
Oh, yeah. Those are big ones.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do those fit into all of this?
Well, for Krishnamurti, fear is really about attachment.
Attachment to
the known, to our memories, our possession,
our beliefs,
our identities even.
So we're afraid of losing.
We're afraid of losing what we cling to.
What we identify with.
Yeah, including our sense of self.
Okay, and desire.
Desire often comes from a sense of lack, a feeling of incompleteness.
Yeah.
And we're always trying to fill that void.
With something external.
With things, with experiences.
With relationships.
Yeah. And that pursuit of desire. It just leads to more suffering.
More conflict.
Yeah, because you're never really satisfied.
Right.
You're always wanting more.
So both fear and desire, they're kind of tied to this idea of the self.
Yeah, the ego.
The me. And he actually asks this really fundamental question.
What is the self?
Yeah, what is the self?
It's a big one.
Right, because he's saying that the self isn't this fixed, solid thing.
It's not a thing at all.
It's more like...
It's more like a process.
Yeah.
A collection of thoughts, memories, identifications.
Yeah.
And we kind of solidify that into this idea of a self.
We create this story about who we are.
Exactly.
But he's saying that that story...
It's a story.
It's not the whole truth.
Right.
And it can actually create a lot of problems.
Yeah, because it creates separation. Between us and others.
Yeah.
Between us and the world.
And that leads to...
To isolation.
Yeah.
To conflict.
Okay, so then he also talks about...
He talks about relationship.
Yeah.
And isolation.
Yeah.
And he seems to be saying that real relationship, it's not about dependence or gratification.
Right.
It's about a deeper kind of understanding and communion that can only happen when this sense of a separate self starts to dissolve.
So when we let go of that ego...
Yeah.
Okay.
And he points out that a lot of our relationships are based on need.
Okay.
On seeking security.
Pledge.
Fulfillment from the other person.
Yeah, and that inevitably leads to disappointment.
To conflict.
Yeah.
Because the other person can never fully meet those needs.
They can't. We have to meet those needs ourselves.
So true relationship, it requires self-knowledge.
It does. It requires awareness.
And it requires letting go.
Of our own projections.
Of our own expectations.
Yeah.
Okay, and then there's this whole thing about simplicity.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not just about decluttering your house. No, it's much deeper than that.
Right. It's more like...
It's an inner state.
Okay.
Of freedom from...
I clutter.
From all the psychological baggage, from the conditioning.
Okay, so you could have a very simple life.
You could.
Outwardly.
Right.
But still be very complex.
Very cluttered.
Internally.
Yeah.
So it's not about what you have.
It's about who you are.
Right.
It's about your inner state.
Okay. And it seems like Krishnamurti's message over and over again is that real change, real transformation has to come from within.
It does.
External solutions, whether they're political or social or religious.
They can only go so far.
Right. They might address the symptoms.
They might.
But they're not going to cure the disease.
Exactly.
So he's not saying don't take action in the world.
Right.
But he's saying make sure that action is coming from a place of...
Of clarity. Of understanding.
Of awareness. And it's interesting that even when he's talking about specific issues like nationalism or war, he always brings it back to the individual.
To the individual.
He says these big societal problems, they're just reflections of
our collective consciousness.
Yeah.
Of the individuals who make up that society.
So he's saying if we want to change the world...
We have to change ourselves.
We have to start with ourselves.
Yeah.
And with nationalism, he's saying it comes from this need.
From this need
to belong.
To identify with something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah.
But that creates separation.
Right. Us versus them. And with war.
With war, he points to the fear.
Yeah.
The desire.
The beliefs.
The aggression.
Yeah.
All the things that drive it at the individual level.
So it's like that saying,
that's it.
You want to change the world.
Yeah.
Change yourself.
Start with yourself.
It all comes back to that.
It does.
And it's kind of what Huxley was getting at, too. Yeah. Right, with that whole thing about the symbols.
Right.
And the danger of mistaking them for reality.
Yeah, they both seem to be saying
that
we need to see beyond the surface.
Yeah.
We need to go deeper.
We need to understand ourselves.
Absolutely.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive into the first and last freedom, what would you say is like the one big takeaway?
The key insight.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's the importance of self-knowledge.
Yeah.
That's the foundation.
The foundation for everything.
For everything, yeah.
Okay.
Krishnamurti is really urging us to turn inward, to examine our own minds, our conditioning.
Motivation.
Yeah, and he's saying that's the path.
That's the path to freedom.
To freedom from suffering.
From conflict.
From confusion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's also challenging us to stop relying so much on external solutions.
Right.
To stop looking for someone else to fix things.
Or some system.
Right.
Or some belief. He's saying the real revolution has to start within each of us.
So I guess the question for you is, how much of your energy,
your attention,
is going towards trying to change things outside of yourself?
Yeah.
When maybe the real change needs to happen.
And the inside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here's a final thought from Krishnamurti that really stuck with me.
I'm listening.
He says, transformation can only take place immediately.
Right.
The revolution is now not tomorrow.
Wow.
So think about that for a minute. What does that mean for you in your own life?
Right.
Where are you waiting for something to change?
Where am I stuck?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or where are you hoping for some future resolution? What if the key to unlocking that change
was right
in this moment?
Right now.
Now that's something to think about.
It is.